Don't forget to like and share this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and sign up to stay updated with our latest content. It was just an ordinary evening until a quiet knock changed everything. I thought I knew my neighbor, polite, distant, and always keeping to himself. But that night, he revealed a secret that tied our lives together in ways I never imagined. What began as a simple chat unfolded into a story of unspoken love, long-held regrets, and emotional healing. I learned more about my mother, myself, and the power of vulnerability in a single conversation than I had in years. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths, and sometimes healing begins with simply being heard. It started like any other evening, quiet, uneventful, even a little dull. I had just finished dinner, the soft hum of the television in the background, and the faint rustle of wind brushing against the windows. I was curled up on the couch with a book in hand, though my mind wasn't on the pages. Something from earlier that day kept tugging at me, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. Then I saw him, Richard, my neighbor, standing at the edge of his driveway, looking strangely unsure of himself. We had lived next to each other for years, exchanging waves, sharing occasional small talk across the fence, but nothing more. He had always struck me as reserved, kind, and quietly dependable, the type of man who kept to himself but was always courteous. That night, however, he looked different, hesitant, vulnerable. When he walked over and asked if he could come in for a moment, I didn't hesitate. I opened the door and welcomed him into the warm familiarity of my home, completely unaware that everything was about to change. He seemed out of place in my cozy living room, fidgeting slightly, eyes darting around before settling on mine. Then, in a quiet voice, he said he needed to share something deeply personal. I could see it in his eyes. This wasn't small talk. This was something he had held on to for years. That moment marked the beginning of a conversation that would shake the foundation of what I thought I knew, not just about him, but about my home, my past, and even my own mother. It was the kind of truth that lives in silence for decades, until it finally finds the courage to speak. Richard stood there, his shoulders slightly hunched, as though carrying the weight of something heavy. He took a deep breath, and with a voice just above a whisper, said words I never expected to hear. "Emily, I've known you much longer than you think. I used to live in this house before your parents did." I blinked, not fully processing what he had just revealed. What did he mean? The idea seemed impossible. This house had always been part of my family's story, passed down, full of memories, of laughter and loss. I had never once heard a single mention of Richard having any connection to it, but he nodded slowly as if reading my disbelief. "It's true, I grew up here just like you." Suddenly, the walls around me felt different, heavier somehow, filled with echoes I had never heard before. My home, the place I had always associated with my parents, especially my mother, now had a history I hadn't known. And Richard wasn't just my neighbor anymore. He was a thread in the very fabric of my past. I watched him closely, unsure of what to say, sensing that there was more. And then he spoke again, more softly this time, with a sadness that cut through the room. "Your mother, she was the love of my life. I never told her." The words hit me like a wave. The man I'd known for years had held a silent love for my mother, a love that was never spoken, never shared, and never realized. I could see the ache in his eyes, the pain of missed chances, the weight of what might have been. In that moment, I knew nothing between us would ever be the same again. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I couldn't. Richard's words echoed in my mind. She was the love of my life. I looked at him, this man I'd always seen as quiet and unassuming, now revealed as someone who had loved my mother deeply, silently, and from afar. It was like discovering a hidden chapter in a book I thought I knew by heart. I had no idea, I finally managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I know," he replied, his gaze steady, though his eyes shimmered with emotion. "No one did, not even her." His confession stirred something in me, a mixture of confusion, sadness, and unexpected tenderness. My mother had passed away years ago, and I had always thought I knew her well. She had been warm but private, strong but gentle. I never imagined there had been someone quietly loving her in the background of her life, someone who had stood by, never daring to speak his truth. Richard looked down at his hands, his voice trembling just slightly. "I was afraid, Emily, afraid of ruining what we had, of being rejected, of saying it too late. And by the time I realized I had waited too long, she was gone." There was so much pain in his voice, but also something more honesty, regret. I felt my heart ache for him, not just for what he had lost, but for what he had carried alone for all those years. And as I sat across from him in that small, quiet room, I realized that sometimes the deepest emotions aren't the ones we express, but the ones we keep hidden, until one day they finally break free. As I looked at Richard, something shifted in the space between us. The air felt heavier, yet more intimate, like we had stepped into a sacred place where vulnerability lived. He wasn't just my neighbor anymore. He was a man who had loved and lost quietly, who had lived with the secret wrapped in silence for decades. And now he was offering that truth to me. I had never seen him this way before. The quiet strength he always carried now revealed itself as something deeper, not just stoicism, but sorrow, not just politeness, but pain. His eyes, once guarded, were now wide open, filled with honesty and longing. And yet, I didn't feel angry or disturbed by what he had shared. Instead, I felt connected. As though by sharing this story, Richard had opened a door between us, one that allowed me to see not only him, but also myself and my past in a new light. "I wish I'd known," I said softly. "I wish she had known." Richard's smile was small and sorrowful. "Me too. But even if she never did, I'm grateful I could finally say it to someone who mattered to her." In that moment, we sat in silence, not the kind that feels awkward, but the kind that wraps around two people like a blanket of mutual understanding. We didn't need to fill the quiet. Everything had already been said. The emotional bond between us wasn't built on years of conversation, but on one single truth bravely spoken. And that truth had changed something fundamental in me. It made me realize how deeply people can feel without ever showing it, and how healing begins the moment we allow someone else to witness our story. The days that followed Richard's confession were quiet, but not in the same way as before. Something between us had shifted. Our usual passing greetings now carried a depth that hadn't been there before, a silent acknowledgement of what had been shared. We didn't speak of it again immediately, but we didn't need to. There was something unspoken that lingered, like the soft echo of a song once heard in childhood. For the first time, I began to reflect not just on my mother's past, but on my own. Richard's words had stirred memories and emotions I had tucked away for years. I started to see her and myself through a different lens. I spent so long living in her shadow that I forgot to see the strength within me. The way Richard spoke of her, strong, graceful, independent, and now he said he saw those same things in me. That idea sat with me for days. I'd always compared myself to her, believing I could never measure up. But maybe I had inherited more than I realized. Maybe her strength had quietly passed to me in ways I hadn't noticed. Maybe being her daughter meant more than just sharing her name. Maybe I carried her legacy in how I lived, loved, and led my life. It wasn't just about Richard anymore. His story had opened a door in me that I hadn't even known was closed. I was beginning to let go of old comparisons, quiet doubts, and the belief that I had to be someone else to be enough. And slowly, just like Richard, I began to make peace with the past. Not by forgetting it, but by finally understanding what it had left behind. As that inner shift began to take root, I found myself more open, not just with my thoughts, but with Richard too. Our encounters became more frequent, though still simple. A wave across the yard turned into a shared cup of coffee on the porch. A few words became full conversations. But what surprised me most was how natural it felt. There were no expectations between us, just the quiet comfort of being seen and understood. Richard had changed too. There was a lightness to him I hadn't seen before, a slow softening in the way he moved, in the way he spoke. It was as if telling his truth had released something inside him. He no longer seemed weighed down by regret. Instead, he appeared more present, more alive. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden surrounded by blooming lavender and the hum of bees, he looked at me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd feel peace again, but somehow, through all this, I do." His words weren't grand, but they struck me deeply, because I felt it too, that quiet peace that comes when we stop resisting the past and start embracing what is. I had been holding on to so many questions, so much self-doubt for years, but now in this space between us, I found clarity. We didn't talk about what we were becoming, whether we were friends, companions, or something still undefined. That didn't matter. What mattered was that we were walking forward side by side, shaped by the past, but no longer trapped in it. In Richard, I found a mirror. And in this growing connection, we both found something neither of us had expected, a new beginning born from old truths, finally spoken. As the days slipped into weeks, Richard and I settled into a quiet rhythm, one marked not by big changes, but by small, meaningful moments. A shared laugh over morning coffee, silent companionship while tending to the garden, evenings spent on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it felt like healing. We both continued to reflect, though in gentler ways. There were fewer tears now, more acceptance. The past no longer sat between us like an untold story. Instead, it had become part of the foundation on which we were slowly building something new, something rooted in trust and mutual respect. I realized how much I had grown since that night. The weight I had once carried of comparison, of unspoken fears, of unresolved grief had begun to lift. It wasn't gone entirely, but it didn't feel so heavy anymore. I had stopped measuring myself against my mother's legacy and instead started embracing the life I was quietly creating for myself. Richard changed too. The hesitancy in his voice had softened. The burden of silence was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. He no longer spoke only from memory. He began to speak in the present and sometimes even of the future. One afternoon, as we sat side by side, he said softly, "It's strange how something so unexpected can change everything." I looked at him, smiling gently. "Sometimes," I replied, "it's the unexpected moments that lead us exactly where we're meant to be." And in that stillness, we both knew this journey we were on wasn't just about finding peace with the past. It was about learning how to live fully in the present and welcoming whatever might come next. As time moved forward, something beautiful unfolded between Richard and me, not something loud or clearly defined, but something steady and deeply felt. We didn't need to label it. What mattered was how it made us feel, lighter, freer, and more alive. Our connection had grown from vulnerability, but it was now nourished by presence, by the simple act of showing up for each other. One evening, as we watched the golden sky fade into dusk, Richard turned to me with a quiet smile. "You know, Emily," he said, "I spent so many years holding on to what I never said. But now I finally feel like I can breathe." His words stayed with me because I knew what he meant. We had both lived with invisible weights, his wrapped in regret, mine woven from uncertainty and grief. But sharing our stories had changed everything. We had released what no longer served us, and in doing so, we had found something better: peace. I no longer felt haunted by the idea of who I thought I had to be. I was no longer chasing my mother's legacy. I was honoring it just by being myself. Richard no longer carried his love as a burden. He carried it as a memory, a part of his past, not the whole of his life. We had come full circle, not by rewriting the past, but by choosing to step out of its shadow. As the breeze stirred the trees around us and the first stars appeared in the evening sky, I realized that life doesn't always give us what we expect, but sometimes it gives us something better: a second chance to understand, to heal, and to begin again with open hearts and no fear of what comes next. Life has a quiet way of teaching us through the most unexpected moments. Sometimes it takes a single conversation to unlock years of silence, healing not just one heart, but two. Richard's unspoken love and Emily's journey of self-discovery remind us that it's never too late not to speak, to forgive, or to begin again. Many of us carry memories and regrets, thinking the past defines who we are. But this story shows us that healing can happen at any stage of life, especially when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and truly connect with others. For seniors, it's a powerful reminder. Even after decades, the heart still has room to grow, to let go, and to rediscover joy. Whether it's a buried memory or a forgotten truth, bringing it to light can transform how we live today. We are not just our past, we are what we choose to do with it now. And sometimes, peace comes not from answers, but from understanding, acceptance, and the courage to open our hearts again. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Please share in the comments one insight you gained and how you plan to apply it in your life. Your feedback is invaluable and keeps us motivated. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support enables us to continue creating content that informs and inspires. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.